All right, boys and girls, in order to paint the backgrounds of your balloon dog, you want to use watercolor paint. If you use regular drawing paper, you can still use it, but you have to be careful. You want to wet your brush, then get your paint wet. Now, you can see I'm barely using any water, okay? And preferably, we would be doing this on watercolor paper, but that might not always be available. So if you have the white drawing paper, you can still paint on it, but you have to do it quickly and with very little water. Okay, so the best way to do that is, as you can see, I'm using my hand to hold the paper still. And even though it might look a little bit transparent when you're painting, it is going to dry a nice solid color. So I'm constantly going back and forth between the water and the paint and the paper. What I like to do is outline my area first and then paint it in section by section. And also you want to paint in the same direction, okay? So I'm leaning the hand that I'm painting with, I'm leaning it on the table, I'm leaning it with my pinky. And you want to go in the same direction as the paper, because this balloon dog was painted horizontally. It's best to paint this horizontally. You kind of want to have a nice solid background to our dog. Now, when you're painting, when you're choosing a color, I would advise that if you use the cool color to do the shading and add the value to your balloon dog, if you use a cool color, I would use a warm color as your background. So I use blue for my balloon dog, so I'm using yellow, which is a warm color, as the background. So I also could have used red, orange, or even magenta or pink if you want. So if you have a dog that's blue, green, or purple, I would suggest doing a background of red, orange, yellow, or magenta, and vice versa. If you have a balloon dog that is painted, that has used colored pencils with warm colors, then you want to use cool colors for the background. As you can see, I'm kind of trying to go nice and quick. And you see how it looks like there's some dark areas and some lighter areas here. That's just because the paper is wet. Again, this is not watercolor paper, so this wouldn't be happening with watercolor paper. But since we started this project on drawing paper, you can get away with painting it as long as you use very little water and more paint, okay? So I'm trying to rotate the painting so that I can get the most access to the areas I want to paint. And again, I'm using my hand that I'm not painting with to hold it still. I'm outlining the shapes that I want to paint inside of. And I'm constantly going back and forth between the water, the paint, and the paper. Now, if your paint is wet enough, you can go back right to the paint without having to wet it all the time, because this way you have a nice solid, bright, saturated kind of lemon yellow. You want your background color to be super saturated, and that's as dark or as bright as a color can be. Think of the color of yellow to be lemons, the color of orange to be oranges, the color of red, if you're going to do red, would be like cherries. Okay? So you want super bright colors, because pop artists such as Jeff Koons use bright colors. And by using a warm color with a cool color, it makes the subject matter really pop off the page. And like I said, don't worry about these marks here that look like it's transparent. All of this is going to dry solid. Okay, so I will show you the final result when it dries. But again, don't worry about it if you have these marks here. By the way, if you happen to do this on computer paper, you cannot paint on computer paper, okay? Again, the best is to do it on watercolor paper, but if we didn't have watercolor paper, you can paint a little bit on this drawing paper. But if you happen to do your project on computer paper, then I would advise using either a marker to colorize the background or colored pencil, which would take a while. Probably marker or a crayon would be best. Even if we have, if we happen to have watercolor pencils, that might work too. But even so, you really don't want to wet the surface of a Xerox paper because it's just gonna go right through. Okay, so also I'm using my fingers here to hold the paper still on the dry area of the paper here. And almost done. This should take you just basically one class. So again, if you're using a cool color for your dog, use a warm color for your background. If you use a warm color for your dog, then use a cool color as a background. Okay? And I will show you a picture of this when it is done.